Music has come a long way to get to where it is today. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I'll let you decide. But before you jump to any conclusions, let me just really quickly explain the entire history of music to you. I know you don't want to listen to me ramble on like this, so I'm going to use the best possible ways to explain history with crude drawings and images pirated from the internet. Aha, that's better. Let's get weird with music. Before I get started, there's a long history of music and a lot of different genres and artists who played over the years. I'm sure I will get to all of them, and if I don't mention your favorite artist or music period, it's because they don't exist, not because I couldn't fit every single person who has ever played music into a single YouTube video. We're going to start at ancient times. No, before that, in pre-literate times, before people even figured out how to write songs down. In actuality, they did write their songs down, it just was misinterpreted as elaborate pictures drawn on cave walls of hunting parties, animals, and ancient aliens. Sorry, pre-literate aliens. Truth is, no one really knows how music started. According to the Bible, some guy named Jubal was really musically inclined and taught all his kids how to jam. But of course that's religion, and according to science, religion is yucky. So instead, a bunch of smart people got in a room with very little evidence and guessed. And when smart people guess, we call them facts. So the facts are: one day, cave friends Zog and Malgarath were grinding roost to eat by hitting rocks against each other. Zog was like, hey, this sounds pretty cool. Malgarath was like, yeah, what if we made mouth sounds to go with it? So they started mimicking birds and the weird sound girls make when they talk to babies, and that's how classic rock was invented. A short few thousand years later, some Slavic cave people were hanging out in a cave, and all of a sudden their stoner friend showed up and was all like, dude, bro, I was all like zoinkered out on shrooms and stuff, bro, and when I woke up, I had this like cave bear arm bone with some holes poked in it, dude. Bro, I don't know if I drilled it or some hyenas chewed on it or what, but listen to what happens when I blow on it, bro. This trend seemed to have caught on, and all the small family groups started playing music to wind down at the end of a long day hunting animals. And then Germany went on the air saying, do you want to play music but don't want to kill a cave bear to do it? Well, guess what? You don't have to. Introducing Vulture Wing Bones! Not only are vultures much less scary than bears, but baby vultures are much less cute than baby bears. Call now and we will send you your very own one-of-a-kind uniquely tuned vulture flute, also available in Hawk, Eagle, and Crane. Yeah, I'll take one, said France, and Greece, and Persia, and Egypt. And then China got a hold of one too, but they were just pissed off because they didn't think of it first, so they decided to improve the recipe. They started making them all about the same size with holes cut in similar places, and now they had scales, like this one. Or this one. Now we can play songs together. Then Sri Lanka said, hey, check this out. It's a string that makes sound when you bow it. I'm going to call it the Ravanhada. India said, yeah, I'm going to take that. Then the whole Middle East said, we're taking that too. And they took it, but they realized it was hard to play, so they started playing with a pick. What a great idea, said Egypt, and they turned it into a turtle. Now the world had instruments and scales and a basic knowledge of how to jam, so now they can start writing songs and getting together complex symphonies and harmonies and... we're not even literate yet? How are we supposed to do all that? Oh. Then Syria said, let's be literate! And so they were literate. They wrote down hymns to the goddess Nikal. She was the goddess of being confusing, so they thought the best way to worship her would be the lyrics at the top of the page and the melody all the way down here. That's nice and hard to read. Speaking of music and religion, in Egypt, the god of music was Bat. Simple enough, right? Well, you see, Bat had a cow head, and Hathor also had a cow head, and people had only just started reading, so it got kind of confusing. So naturally, the two became the same god. So Hathor was the goddess of music. Simple enough, right? Well, Hathor had a bad habit of turning into a lion and going on a killing spree every time it got too hot outside, and since Cannibal Corpse hadn't been invented yet, that was not a positive thing. So the duties went to her son Ai, who was too busy watching people do it. So they went to Bez, who was too busy watching people do it. So it went to Osiris, but he was in charge of the afterlife, and that's kind of a big deal. Bastet was next in line, but she was a cat, and I can't even trust my cat to stay off the counter, let alone with all of music. Anyway, I better stop talking about religion before science gets too triggered. So, what are you up to, India? Writing Hindu songs. Come on, is there any science anywhere? China's figuring out the Overtone series. The Overtone series is long and complicated and it's gonna have to be in another video. Israel and Greece both opened up schools for music, but the Greek one is cooler, so let's focus on that. The Greeks invented a core curriculum. They had 4 things that was very important to them that every student should understand. The first was math, the second was math, the third was math, and the fourth was math. More specifically, it was boring math, shapes math, planets math, and sound math. Then smart guy Plato and smart guy Pythagoras decided that planets math and sound math was the same thing. They decided that every planet resonated at a certain frequency, and if music lined up with those frequencies, then it sounded good. For the purposes of this video, we're going to call that theory music is the planets. Then Aristoxenus and Aristotle said, no, music isn't the planets. Music is— Shut up, said the rest of the world. Music is the planets! And so music is the planets. The Greeks also started making musicals, but they weren't any good until the Romans started doing it. Meanwhile, Japan had an idea. They said, we have all these instruments, why not use them? So they put them all together and created the orchestra, the Gagaku. And then in China, Confucius was like, music is pretty cool. Just kidding. He said music is part of your soul, and a person's caliber with an instrument is a direct link to their morality. So in short, if you are a bad musician, you are the essence of evil itself. You know, or something like that. Also, the Chinese government made a branch to control and document music. Then everybody decided to trade instruments. Egypt made a harp and gave it to its neighboring country of Ireland. Then Alexander the Great decided that everything needed to be Macedonia, and so all the places that used to not be Macedonia had to share instruments. And China started trading everyone's everything for silk. They discovered the oud and felt left out because they were the only country who hadn't stolen it yet, so they took it and flattened it out and called it a pipa. Then Japan said, what a neat idea, so they also took it and called it a biwa. And then in Rome, Rome is a thing now. Then in Rome, they started making music theory textbooks that just said, do what Greece did. So, you know, music is the planets. The Romans did a thing called mimes for fun. That was a mixture of song and acting and dirty jokes and strippers. It's like the Renaissance fair, only with strippers. Part of that was pantomimus. It was a story that was told through song and interpretive dance. It was really the first kind of music ever to tell a story, not through the lyrics, but through the music itself. The Romans had a bunch of early versions of modern-day instruments, like this hydraulic organ or the tuba. No, that thing that looks exactly like a modern-day tuba, that's a bucina. That's a tuba. Then after a while, Rome broke, and there became a big gap between rich and poor people, and all the poor people said, remember when nobody could read or write? Yeah, let's go back to that. And Japan said the Westerners are a mess, so they shut down their borders. The Japanese rich people were pretty much all musicians, and without outside influence, their music got super Japanese. Meanwhile, the European rich people started making chants out of Bible verses. The monks put music to the Bible so they could remember it, and also they would sing during church because church was in Latin and no one spoke Latin, so something had to keep them awake. Different cultures developed different types of chants to make them more unique. In Spain, Mozarabic chants, in Italy, Ambrosian chants, in Ireland, Galatian chants. Now every culture could worship God in their own way. The church said, this is chaos, and made everyone do Gregorian chants. In order to make this happen, they hired Hildegard von Bingen, who had the coolest freaking stage name ever. She went by Sybil of the Rhine. She was the first female composer in Western music, and the first composer of any kind to make this video. So ha! Take that, patriarchy! Granted, her job wasn't that hard because at the time music was just one sung melody with nothing crazy like harmony or counter melody to go with it. Then someone had the idea to add harmony in the form of parallel fifths. Now for those of you who aren't familiar with what a parallel fifth sounds like, this is it. They called that organum, but the madness didn't stop there. They also introduced florid organum, which is where one singer would sing really low and slow melody, and everybody else sang high and fast on top of that. They also started writing down musical notation that kinda looks like what we use now. Okay, I've been talking a lot about Europe. Let's check in on Japan. How you doing, Japan? Pretty good. Music has gotten super Japanese because we aren't letting any white people in. Also, the Todo Za Guild has started singing war stories from ancient wars, but they can never tell if they have the crowd or not because all of them are blind. Wow, that's really interesting. Hey, China, can you top that? Gukuen music's pretty cool. Is that it? Yeah, pretty much. Oh, well, how about you, Egypt? Nothing. Ireland? Still playing the harp. Aztecs? Yeah, we got all kinds of innovative musicians. We decided to tear their hearts out and sacrifice them to the sun god. That's nice. Anyway, let's go back to Europe. The Galliards had an epiphany. They realized they could write music that isn't about God. A hush falls over the crowd. No one's ever thought of this before. We could even use instruments. They used their newfound freedom to write songs and plays making fun of the church. In France, Notre Dame started going crazy with writing music. Not only did they start notating rhythm, they started having multiple lines of music do different things. Like one guy could sing a lower note and then a higher note, and then the other guy could sing a higher note and a lower note. Like, this is anarchy. From this point forward, every time music got a little bit more complicated, somebody had to rename it. Nothing new has come out of Germany in a while. What's new with you, Germany? What, is this like an angsty teen phase or something? No, everyone is dead. Oh, well, that happened fast. But you gotta admit, the Black Death does sound like a pretty cool early 2000s emo band. Hold on, let me check something real quick. The Black Death band. Let's see, it's the first all-African-American heavy metal band. Well, if you didn't learn anything else from this video. Italy went into quarantine for 40 days, and that seemed to do the trick so they could make music again. They got together with France over a Zoom call and decided to rename music again, and then BAMO! There's a renaissance. Then some guy was like, hey, check this out. Let's base everything off this for the next 600 years. Everybody agreed. Then John Dunstable was like, hey guys, check this out. What if instead of going from C to E, and hear me out here, what if we went from E to C? Then everybody's head exploded and made him the first European superstar that no one's ever heard of. And in his wake, Oswald von Wolkenstein leaned casually on a table and said, I don't always write music, but when I do, I prefer to change the world. He is the most interesting man in music. First, he thought those blind musicians in Japan were cool, so he tried to do that but quit halfway. He wrote world-changing music about God, then he wrote world-changing music about sex, then he got knighted and joined a secret organization called the Order of the Dragon. Name one person who lived a fuller career than that. I'll wait. Then a Chinese guy got together with a Dutch guy and they decided to do a science. The result? Music is not the planets. Aristotle wanted to say I told you so but couldn't because he was super dead. They made a new tuning system that made it to where you don't have to retune your instrument every time you play in a new key. Everyone hated it, until Vincenzo Galilei said it was pretty cool. Then everyone said, who even are you? He said, I'm Galileo's dad. I don't know who that is, but I like the way that sounds. So now everybody loved it. Now on the exploration side of things, Christopher Columbus set sail to try to find India, but instead found Super India. And everybody else in Europe followed behind trying to call dibs. Turns out there was already somebody living there who had their own musical traditions. Not that the Europeans cared. The Spanish heard the Mayan music and kinda liked it. They noted that even though they couldn't understand the words to a song, they could tell when it was happy or sad, and they could even get their own instruments and play along. The English colonies, on the other hand, were just mad because the Indians weren't listening to Gregorian chants. So they set out to make Native American music boring. Mani Orisi was a missionary at this time who went east to China to try to make their music boring, but the Chinese ended up showing him how to make Guqin music. Then they went to Mongolia to try to make their music boring, but Mongolian music was already boring, so they left and went to Japan to try to make their music boring. And it almost worked, but luckily in Okinawa, the Sanshin was getting popular. Then some people brought the Sanshin over to the mainland of Japan, and one fateful day a Sanshin player was trying to practice, but his dog wouldn't stop barking. So he did what any sensible man would do and stretched his dog's skin over the Sanshin and made the most popular instrument in Japan. Martin Luther wrote a list of complaints against the Catholic Church, then his followers took that to mean they needed to kill all the Catholics. Where should we start? How about Rome? Good idea. And so they went in and broke Rome again. All the Roman musicians decided to move to Venice to get away from all that, but realized that Venice had better music anyway. The people who stayed in Rome didn't seem to agree. And now, for the fight of the century! In one corner, we have the Venetian school with the antiphonic style, large, grand, interlocking melodies, and the home field advantage. Give it up for Adrian Willett. In the other corner, from the ashes of Rome, with the backing of the entire Catholic Church, with clearly understood lyrics and government-controlled Gregorian chants, and their fearless leader, and the most Italian man ever to walk the face of the earth, Giovanni Pierluigi de Palestrina! Oh, it was a one-punch knockout by the Venetians. It turns out the Gregorian chant sucked this whole time. The Venetian school got popular all over Europe and began a time in music so influential that inspired a US president. Barack Obama. Okay, that was really bad. Let me try again. The Venetian school got popular all over Europe and began a time in music so influential that it inspired a vegetable. Broccoli. Screw you, that was funny. Anyway, Florentine Camerata one day said, "These kids and their newfangled Baroque music, I can't stand it. Let's go back to when music was the planets." So he tried to make ancient Greek music and somehow ended up with opera. And Claudio Monteverdi had a wild idea. What if the lower instruments played the boring parts and the higher instruments played the fun parts? Meanwhile, in America, all the folk traditions from every country you have ever heard of were coming together and men were hammering it out on the fiddle. Not the women, though. They had to play the harpsichord and the guitar because those were girly instruments. Damn it. Anyway, what's new with you, Ireland? Still playing the harp. Really? That's it? No. It's been like 1,000 years and we're really good at it now. We play for like chieftains and such. Then King Henry VIII said, you know what I want? Ireland. And so he sent an army to take it. Spain said, I'd help you if the weather didn't suck so much in Ireland. So the English took Ireland and all the chieftains ran away and the harpists were now unemployed. In Japan, theater kids started running the show by creating Nogaku with stories told through song and dance. Also, Yatsuhashi Kingo became an incredible koto player and made the koto more popular than the samisen. Our old Italian friend Claudio Monteverdi had another wild idea. What if you put 30 musicians in a room together and made a huge band called an orchestra? The Japanese weren't very impressed because they'd been doing that for years, but, sure, give the white guy credit. Now let's skip ahead just a smidge to the first composer anyone has actually heard of, Antonio Vivaldi. I'm pretty sure Vivaldi wrote something other than the Four Seasons, but nobody cares about those. Really kind of a one-hit wonder. But seriously, Vivaldi was an undeniably talented composer and even more so a talented violin player. And on top of all this, he was a genuinely good person. He volunteered at an orphanage and even spent some time as a priest. So naturally, he died in poverty. Next up, we have Johann Sebastian Bach. Bach invented a two-step system that thousands of musicians would live by to this very day. Step 1. Be an incredible musician. Step 2, be an unbearable douchebag. Like seriously, one of his choir boys attacked him with a stick, and the church he was working for ruled that he probably deserved it for being such a dick. Anyway, he wrote like 90% of the music you've heard from this period, except for Four Seasons, and then went on to die from eye surgery. Noticing a weird pattern of musicians having bad eyes. George Frederick Handel wrote the other 10% of music you have heard from this period. He was born in the same year as Bach, but he focused mostly in opera. Most notably, he wrote the opera Messiah, and it blew up, so he decided to quit while he was ahead. His eyes were also bad, but he saw Bach die from eye surgery, so he didn't want to risk it and just went mostly blind. Like seriously, what is it with great musicians and having bad eyes? Anywho, what's next? Let's see. In 1717, the pirate Captain Calico Jack set sail. That has nothing to do with music, but I went through a phase when I was like really into pirates, so that information is permanently burned into my brain. But I suppose it's worth mentioning that pirates and other sailors were singing sea shanties to keep themselves motivated while they work. But before you get too excited, The Wellerman wasn't going to be written for like another 150 years. But you know what was being written? Amazing Grace, which was John Newton making the most recognizable song on the planet. At the Cross was also being written at this time, which if you grew up in a Southern Baptist church like I did, you probably know. Charles Wesley and Isaac Watts were writing a list of classic hymns a mile long, and in America, Greensleeves was being written, which is What Child Is This, only with different lyrics. And finally, in Wales, William Williams was also making hymns. Music was really complex, which meant it was hard to sing along to, so composers started to simplify songs so that melodies were more recognizable. Hey, I'm Fat Albert T-Bass, said early classical era basslines. Okay, not my best, but Alberti basslines did become prominent. Then in Mannheim, some new techniques started being used that sounded less like musical words and more like something Goku might do in Dragon Ball Z, like Mannheim Rocket, Mannheim Roller, and Mannheim Climax. People got interested in music that was big and dramatic. They liked them when it was quiet and solemn and beautiful, and then BAMO! Whammo! You get roundhouse kicked in the face by a Chuck Norris made a sound! But there was a problem. The harpsichord only played one volume all boring-like, and by this time the harpsichord was everyone's favorite instrument. What we need is a keyboard with more dynamic diversity. A new instrument was invented in Italy by Bartholomew Cristofori, which is aptly named the Loudsoft. No, seriously, you can't make this crap up. Okay, well, actually is the forte piano, which is the Latin words for Loudsoft, but still, you thought musicians being uncreative and unoriginal was a new thing? So Joseph Haydn was the first classical composer that anyone cares about. Haydn was born into a wealthy family who found out from a young age he loved to play music. And as anyone who's lived in the house with a young musician can relate to, they couldn't wait to get rid of him, so they shipped him off to musical boarding school, where he learned what it meant to be poor because all the people who lived there were musicians and so therefore by extension broke. But old Joseph grew up and made something out of himself and paved the way for who can only be described as the main character of music, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Mozart is one of the most brilliant minds ever to make music. He had an unparalleled understanding of harmony and melody and advanced music in ways that baffles musicians to this day. He also had a great sense of humor, writing pieces like The Musical Joke, where the horn parts purposefully out of key. Or if you prefer the song, Lick My Arse Right Well and Clean. But perhaps his most amazing achievement came in his opera Così fan tutte, or All Women Do It. He noticed that singer Adriana Ferraris del Bene had a habit of lowering her chin whenever she sang low notes and raising it when she reached for the higher ones. So he decided to write her part to have a bunch of large leaps from low to high so he could sit back and watch her bob her head like a chicken. What a freaking legend. After he died, Ludwig van Beethoven took his place. Beethoven didn't get the memo that composers are supposed to have bad eyes, so instead he had bad ears. The older he got, the more deaf he got, and he waited until he was almost all the way deaf before he decided to write some of his best work. Then Schubert, despite being one of my favorite romantic composers, spent his life in Beethoven's shadow. Anyway, he liked to get weird with music. Around this time, America and France got to talking and decided they didn't want to be friends with England anymore. So England decided to
send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love.
and in turn took a bunch of people and money and went to war, and so orchestras got smaller and people couldn't really afford the big ones anyway.
Listen, they want us to pay for the beer we drank, so you guys better split.
Anyway, while all that was going on, Egypt was something worth talking about for the first time in like 2,000 years. The Awalim were girls who could sing very well, and they were hired by rich people as part of a harem. No, it's not what you think. They would stand over in the corner with Bez and I, and she would sing to set the mood. As time went on, the Awalim stopped being just singers and became entertainment mercenaries. They could sing, play instruments, belly dance, and were even actresses. They were the sex symbols of Egypt and living large as high society. Meanwhile, the Alma were, they were hookers. That is, up until prostitution was made illegal and the Alma just rebranded as Awalim and would come over for private parties and, sing. Let's check in on the rest of Africa. Where is everyone? America. Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah, we're slaves for 6 days a week, but on Sunday we get to go to Congo Square and play old traditional African music. Well, on this side of the country, we just mixed all the Western styles together and made Appalachian music. We're all just singing hymns. And then New Orleans said, "Hey, Congo Square, we just decided you have to sing hymns now too." Okay, but we're not going to sing them, right? And that's how the Negro spiritual was invented. People started bringing Appalachian music with them west. Some Native Americans taught them some tricks, then the Negro spiritual singers taught them some tricks, then Mexican musicians taught them some tricks. Then Appalachian music wasn't really Appalachian anymore, it was music of the whole West. Let's call it Western. Then in France, they started playing bagpipes and accordions and playing them hard and fast to make bal musette, which is just polka but French. This idea made its way to Mexico where it became polka but not French. Then Irish music started to sound like Irish music. And Scotland was finally allowed to play the organ, which is really just a hand-me-down because the rest of the world was done with it. Scottish hard labourers would live together in bothies and made folk songs called bothy ballads. Really, bothy ballads were the 19th century Scottish equivalent of
Take our turn singing them dirty rap songs.
Frederick Chopin and John Fields were talking one day. Chopin said, "You know what we need? Music that is so edgy that you can only listen to it at night." And John Fields said, "That's a great idea!" So the two of them wrote late-night bar music and called it nocturne music. Then in Russia, Tchaikovsky updated Bach's two-step list that a lot of musicians would follow to this day. Step 1, be an incredible musician. Step 2, be an unbearable drama queen. Tchaikovsky also decided the orchestra wasn't big enough, so he added a part for cannons. Like literal cannons. He's most famous for writing a piece in which he titled "The Only Ballet Anybody Cares About." But no one got the joke because no one cares about ballet. So he reluctantly renamed it the Nutcracker. Meanwhile in Germany, Wilhelm Richard Wagner was a brilliant composer, and he wrote a 4-part long, 20-hour-long mega opera with hundreds of leitmotifs, amazing storytelling aspects, and harmonic complexities, and the whole world was like, I don't get it. So then he rewrote Romeo and Juliet and everybody lost their mind, mostly because he played this chord. This started like a 100-year-long competition to find the ugliest chord, which we call the modern era. Coincidentally, it's also when people stopped listening to orchestral and symphonic music. From then on, Claude Debussy is the only composer anybody cares about because he accidentally created Impressionist music. Back in America, a couple of black musicians, namely Emmett and Foster, started singing about their hardships in creating blues music, which is a fact that I had a hard time fact-checking, so you're going to have to take it with a grain of salt the size of Wikipedia. Then in Mexico, Western music and polka got fused together to create mariachi music, and Cuban and Haitian music also got mixed in there. Back in Russia, they are desperate to make the next big thing in music. Igor Stravinsky said, "Let's be experimental." Someone else said, "Let's just pretend it's still 1750. And even then someone else said, "Instead of stacking thirds to make harmonies, let's stack fourths and fifths." Then Leon Theremin said, "Let's make an instrument you don't even have to touch to play it." And none of those took off, so the recently freed slaves in America said, "Hold my beer." And they made jazz, which quickly got, fairly popular in a modest area. Then everyone tried to take credit for it, and enough subgenres came out to make a pokey rap. Soviet jazz, Afro-Cuban, bebop, smooth jazz, hard bop, dilla jazz. Then Django Reinhardt made gypsy jazz, where you can substitute fingers for talent. Then in Tennessee, the Grand Ole Opry was created, but then they had to wait around a few years for country music to be invented so they had something to play. Oh, there it is. Arkansas Traveler, the first country song. This movement brought a bunch of early stars like Fiddlin' John Carson. Not too long after this, a German guy named Adolf showed up and changed everything. Adolf Rickenbacker, that is. Wait, who did you think I was talking about? Anyway, Rickenbacker liked the way guitar sounded, he just wanted it to be louder. Get your blood flowing. Electrify you. There's an idea. Electric. Let's call him the cool Adolf. About the same time, the uncool Adolf decided he wanted to be a painter instead of a musician. Parallel old as time. Then in China, a man named Li Junhui decided to mix traditional Chinese music with, you guessed it, jazz. Young people loved it. Old people thought it was porn. He really had the makings of the first pop star. He called his music Shideku, and it was really... Wait, something's happening. Oh, it's the uncool Adolf. He decided to trade in painting for genocide. So music became propaganda with harmony. Everybody in every country involved in the war was making music to support their troops. It just so happened that the song Lily Marlene made good propaganda for both England
For you, Lily Marlene,
and Germany. In Russia, Dmitry Shostakovich pledged to write music for the Soviet Union, and used it as an excuse to belittle and honestly make fun of the mother country. Shostakovich, you have my approval. But everyone else in Russia and Germany had to pass a very strict vetting process before releasing any music. Karl Orff was an excellent example, making old German folklore stories into music. Very German of you. You passed the inspection. America didn't have such strict censorship because the people were just already writing patriotic music, like Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy or Der Führer's Face and Praise the Lord and Pass the Munitions. That last one's particularly American. World War II ended dramatically, and for America that meant they could go back to playing music. There was a fusion between blues and country music, and they called that rockabilly. Carl Perkins bought some blue suede shoes and wanted to make sure that nobody stepped on them, but they probably got stepped on a lot because nobody cared. Then all the rockabilly fans got together and decided they needed an anointed king, one to rule them all. They chose the one, the $1 million panty dropper, the hip-shaking, jail-breaking Elvis Presley. He also bought some blue suede shoes and issued by royal decree that nobody could step on them. He then released an album called Heartbreak Hotel and got, popular enough so he could pay his bills. About that time, Les Paul made the electric guitar better, and artists like Richie Valens and Daniel Flores liked what they were hearing, so they shipped it down to Latin America. Even further down, Brazil wasn't buying into the whole crank it up to 11 thing. They much preferred crank it up to like 3 or 4 and sway gently with the music. And that's pretty much bossa nova.
Bossa Nova. You listen to that with your hips as well as...
However, over in Australia, they started to accept the reign of King Presley and started rockin'. Johnny O'Keefe was even elected the King Regent of Australia. Then Europe made a contest to find out who the best musician was. It didn't really work because you would think the best musician would be someone you've heard of before, and I've never heard of any of these people. But they did find quite the assortment of young, attractive, dark-headed women.
wow, wow.
Then rock got jealous of how many subgenres jazz had and started making some of their own. In Cuba, they forgot how to name genres of music and ended up calling one cha-cha-cha. While in Jamaica, they thought they could do better and named one ska, so no, they can't. Japan mixed their pop music with American rock music and invented kaiokoku. Now that's how you name a genre. "We found them!" screamed Europe. Found who? "The best musicians! They're called the Beatles! They've been hiding in Liverpool this whole time!" So the Beatles went on to play for Ed Sullivan, and then a modest 73 other million people. Well, most of the people just watched from home while licking Cheetos dust off their fingers. The Beatles taught the world many moral lessons. Most of them didn't make any sense, like the fact that we're all in a yellow submarine, Paul McCartney isn't dead, but most importantly, they taught us that you don't need to be sober to make music. Americans really took this to heart and used it to write brilliant lyrics like
Jeremiah was a bullfrog!
Stephen Sondheim was a brilliant playwright who crapped out masterpiece after masterpiece for 4 decades. Honestly, it's an atrocity that he's not a household name. I mean, at least this happened. Then Johnny Cash was another brilliant artist who had a list of hits about 5 miles long. In fact, they were active the same years. They both have dark hair, pronounced noses, and foreheads. I mean, I'm just saying, you put a beard on Johnny and you got yourself a Steven. Okay, we're getting off topic. Chili said, "Hey, since everyone's sharing music now, check this out. It's called Musica Cibola and it's really emotional," and "No," said the rest of the world. Also, doesn't Musica Cibola translate to... Hold on. Onion music? Really? Let's not give Chili the aux cord anymore. Then, for a time, music started to suck. Like, hard rock's pretty cool, and John Williams wrote the score for Star Wars, which is of course timeless, and I guess reggae was okay, but everything else kinda sucked. Like, America invented disco, which died 5 seconds later. And everybody else in the world tried to take credit for electronically synthesized music, which started an endless cycle of spending 3 seconds to make music. Then the jazz legend himself, Miles Davis, created jazz fusion, which is just the worst parts of jazz mixed with the worst parts of pop. Then in Nigeria, they mixed African rhythms that I probably should have brought up at any other point with jazz, and they got Afrobeat. Wait, Afro? Beat. Isn't that just disco all over again? Hey New York, it's me, Chili. I've got some music for you to check out. It's called salsa. No, and what is up with you naming music after food? Please? No. Please? No. Please? Okay. And so salsa flooded its way into New York, who added an erotic twist to it and made salsa erotica. Okay, that's like a niche subgenre that lasted like 2 days, but I have to say words like erotic every once in a while to keep you interested. Also in New York, some African Americans realized that jazz was dead, so they needed to make a new genre of music to beat everything. With jazz, they made a genre that started good and slowly got better. They decided to go a different route with this time. They made hip-hop, a genre that started good and quickly got worse. Meanwhile, the rock scene said, "Hey, you know how there's hundreds of different scales and they all convey different complex emotions? Yes, screw that. We have the minor pentatonic scale and we can play it like really fast." This gave rise to glam rock, a style of music that isn't as much about melodies and harmonies as it is about tightness of pants. Like, did he just miss a note? Crotch bulge! Are they playing the same chord progression again? Crotch bulge! And that's basically how every single person in Los Angeles got famous. Japan loved this idea, only they called it Visual Kai, a name coined by ex-Japan's guitarist Hyde. What the Hyde? That name is so cool! Like, that's almost as cool as Slash! Oh my god, we need a collaboration. Mexico figured out how to make boy bands without thinking of the implications. Then, out of Argentina came the first Spanish-speaking rock band to achieve global success. They were new. They were heavy. They were ready for anything. They called themselves Soda Stereo. Soda Stereo. Okay, no, I can't make that sound cool. Alright, South America, you're not allowed to name anything anymore. Then every single person in Seattle got famous for 5 minutes and we call that grunge. Then hip-hop entered its golden age. Not to be confused, it had already gotten considerably worse from where it started. The first bit of hip-hop was the platinum age and it just digressed from there to gold. And since we're talking about heavy metals, let's go on a trip to Norway. What's new with you, Norway? Oh, that's nice. So black metal was coming up in Norway. What is black metal, you ask? Since there's no chance of this video getting monetized anyway, I'm just gonna go ahead and let Boy in a Band explain it for me.
If you did not record your black metal album in a shed in Norway in the freezing cold on one microphone that was very far away on the other side of the shed, it is not black metal.
And that is black metal. Then all the white people in America said, we need something to listen to when we're drunk. So somebody's computer said, I got you, fam. And that's how EDM started. EDM pretty quickly branched out into like 1,000 subgenres, including one called drum and bass. Okay, full disclosure, when I found out there was a genre of music called drum and bass, I just assumed I would hate it, but then I went and listened to it, and it's honestly pretty good. Rock finally made it to Taiwan, also Taiwan finally made it into this video, and they started growing rockers like Wu Bai and Modern Dog. Then the Spice Girls got pretty popular, and that's pretty much all I need to say about that. When I say popular, I mean popular. Also, the last good country songs got written. They were Achy Breaky Heart and Boot Scootin' Boogie. As a side note, just because I said the words Achy Breaky Heart, that song will be stuck in your head for the next 6 weeks. I think 90s country music can be summed up in one quote. Music has gotten pretty bad, I think. It's all that damn line dancing. That was Chet Atkins, the country musician. Okay, so this is the point where I got sick of doing research, and trust me, I did a lot of research for this video. Like a lot. Like at least enough to deserve you liking and subscribing. Come on, that's all I ask. Also, I lived through the next part, so I figured I don't need to do the research. Rock got really angsty, like it seems all they ever did was play heavy riffs and rap about their problems. And yes, I said rap. Rock bands started including rap verses in their songs. I don't know who started it, but I'm gonna give credit to Linkin Park, so that's a fact now. Justin Bieber was a child prodigy, except everyone told him he was a child prodigy, so he quit trying and just assumed everybody would like whatever he crapped out. And so he built a career out of spending 30 minutes to make a song and then doing something stupid on the news. Rinse and repeat. Lil Wayne was a rapper who thought he could play guitar and accidentally created Stevie T's career.
Okay, now picks. Gotta go. Picks are for losers.
And speaking of, the internet became a place where musicians could get together and create all kinds of beautiful garbage. Okay, in all seriousness, I actually think that the music that's being made on the internet right now is going to be the music that stands the test of time. There's some really cool stuff happening right now. And to prove it, here's a little compilation for you guys.
Castaways, we are castaways.
Why'd you leave the keys up on the table? Here, go create another fable. Grab a
I was never taught how to vote. They devoted that time to defining isotopes. Distract ourselves so we don't see what we've become.
Alright, we're in the final stretch. Let's finish this thing out. Country music started being made by people who have literally never been to the country, and then the internet made jazz cool again. As for international music, Japan has Baby Metal, Moldova has the Numa Numa song, Germany has Du Hast, and Korea has Gangnam Style. But perhaps the greatest achievement music has ever seen came in 2014. One could safely assume that all music up to this point had been building up to this one song. And then in 2020, everyone decided that it wasn't safe to play music in public anymore, which I was really salty about because I was hoping to go see Disturbed live in concert. And that about puts us up to speed. I definitely got to everything, and there's no possible way that I could have missed anything at all. There really isn't all that many musicians or styles of music that have existed over the years, so everything could be easily fit into one video. Anyway, thank you for watching. So I showed my brother this video, and he told me I should probably come up with a sources cited page. I just wish he would have told me that 3 months earlier so I could have made a sources cited page. So I did my best to recall every website I visited or article I read, and this is what I came up with.